My hand trembled, just slightly, hidden in the folds of my sequined clutch. Inside, cool against my fingertips, was a folded piece of paper, an email printout. Proof. Deadly, irrefutable proof. Outside, the sound was deafening. Thunderous applause crashed around me, echoing in the cavernous ballroom, a wave of adoration directed at her. Clara, standing center stage, bathed in a spotlight so bright it seemed to burn, soaking it all in with that practiced, radiant smile. They were cheering for her supposed miracle, $100,000 pledged to the Children's Heart Hospital. My hospital, the one this whole gala, my meticulously planned event, was for. My stomach twisted into a tight, nauseous knot. The glittering chandeliers, the scent of lilies and expensive champagne, the sea of admiring faces, it all felt suddenly grotesque, unreal. Because I knew her grand gesture. The act securing her place as the night's heroine was nothing more than smoke and mirrors. A calculated lie wrapped in philanthropic ribbon. She caught my eye across the room, just for a second, and gave the tiniest, almost imperceptible smirk. Pure triumph. She thought she'd won, thought she'd finally eclipsed me using the most cynical stage imaginable. But the final act wasn't hers to write. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic counterpoint to the applause. The air crackled with her temporary victory, but I held the fuse to blow it all apart. And I was about to light it. Before Clara turned my professional life into a battleground, things were blessedly normal. Predictable, even. As a woman building her event planning business from the ground up in this cutthroat city, my days were a whirlwind. Yes, but a fulfilling one. Client briefs, site visits, juggling vendors, wrestling spreadsheets into submission. It was demanding, but I loved the intricate dance of logistics and creativity. My apartment wasn't huge, but it was my sanctuary, bathed in morning light, walls covered in inspiration boards, samples of linen and lace piled on the table, always the faint aroma of strong coffee in the air. It was organized chaos, the engine room of my dreams. Work wasn't just a job, it was my passion project, especially the annual gala for the Children's Heart Hospital. That connection ran deep. Years ago, my little cousin spent critical weeks fighting for his life in that hospital. I remembered the sterile smell, the constant beeping of machines, the quiet heroism of the nurses, the fear that gripped our family. The care he received was extraordinary, life-saving. So when I finally landed the contract to plan their main fundraiser 3 years back, it felt like more than just a career milestone. It was personal. Each year became a mission. Make it more impactful, raise more money, honor the work they did. Life felt structured, earned. I worked hard, poured my energy into building relationships based on trust and delivering exceptional results. My reputation was growing. People knew me as reliable, detail-oriented, someone who operated with integrity. That word, integrity, it wasn't just a buzzword for my website. It was the cornerstone of everything I did. I believed, perhaps naively, that talent and hard work were the only currencies that mattered in the long run. I hadn't yet fully internalized that for some people, envy is a more powerful motivator than ambition. That some see another person's success not as inspiration, but as an obstacle to be demolished. I hadn't grasped that someone could smile to your face while plotting to stab you in the back with a diamond-encrusted letter opener. Clara Bellwether was about to give me a masterclass. Clara. Even her name felt like a brand she'd meticulously crafted. She moved in the same circles I did, a fellow event planner, but our philosophies were worlds apart. I aimed for understated elegance, seamless experiences. Clara aimed for noise, spectacle, and blindingly bright spotlights, always pointed directly at herself. She was undeniably polished, always dressed in the latest, sharpest styles, her voice a smooth, confident melody that could charm birds from trees, or so it seemed. But behind the expensive sunglasses, her eyes were sharp, constantly calculating, assessing threats and opportunities. And lately, her gaze seemed to linger on me with an unnerving frequency. The smile she offered during our infrequent industry run-ins felt stretched thin, brittle. We'd exchanged polite, empty greetings at various functions for years. I knew her by reputation, fiercely ambitious, notoriously thin-skinned about criticism, and occasionally accused of aggressively borrowing concepts from competitors. I'd tried to maintain a professional distance, focusing on my own clients and projects. The first real crack in that polite facade, the moment that sent a chill down my spine, occurred about 6 months before the Gala nightmare. I'd just presented my initial concept for the Children's Hospital Gala to the organizing committee. The theme, Constellations of Hope, was something I was incredibly proud of. Interactive light displays, star dedications for donors, a whole celestial journey. The committee was enthusiastic, energized. A couple of weeks later, Clara, who had zero official role in the gala planning, somehow cornered the committee chairwoman at a different charity luncheon. A trusted source on the committee later relayed the conversation to me, hesitantly. Clara had apparently sighed dramatically and mentioned how she'd explored a very similar Starry Night concept for a smaller, private event recently. She hadn't directly accused me of anything, oh no. She was too clever for that. It was pure insinuation, a carefully planted seed of doubt about my originality, delivered with a sympathetic frown. My contact assured me the chairwoman hadn't bought it, recognizing it as professional jealousy. But the attempt itself, the casual malice of it, stunned me. Why even do that? Why try to undermine my creative work unless she felt threatened? It wasn't just competition anymore. It felt personal. A small, ugly stain on an otherwise exciting project. That incident lingered, a persistent hum of unease beneath the surface. It was the first tremor before the earthquake, and I foolishly underestimated the potential magnitude. That initial attempt to subtly discredit my gala theme was just the opening salvo. After that, Clara's presence felt like a shadow I couldn't quite shake, her actions growing increasingly disruptive, though still cloaked in plausible deniability. At industry mixers or sponsor previews, I'd spot her across the room, deep in conversation with executives from companies I'd been carefully cultivating for gala sponsorship. She'd laugh, touch their arm, lean in conspiratorially. I couldn't hear the words, but her body language screamed self-promotion. Later, one potential sponsor mentioned offhandedly that Clara had painted a picture of her own events as being far more modern and buzzworthy than the traditional galas. The implication was clear. My work was solid, maybe, but stale. Hers was the future. Then the whispers started circulating, reaching me through concerned friends and colleagues. The narrative shifted from questioning my creativity to questioning my competence. Heard Sarah's struggling with the scale of a children's hospital event this year. Someone mentioned she's way over budget. Is she really up to handling such a high-profile client? The rumors were vague, unattributed, but they all served the same purpose, to erode confidence in me, professionally. The phrasing, the specific anxieties preyed upon, it had Clara's fingerprints all over it. I started documenting everything even more obsessively, a knot of anxiety tightening in my chest. Around the same time, Clara unveiled her public persona as St. Clara of the Perpetual Charity. Her Instagram feed, typically a curated gallery of her fabulous life, suddenly featured poignant quotes about giving back, shared articles about pediatric cardiology, and photos of her volunteering. For precisely 1 hour, I later found out, at a soup kitchen, carefully tagged with #philanthropy and #making a difference. It was nauseatingly transparent. Clara, whose defining characteristic was relentless self-interest, was now presenting herself as the second coming of Audrey Hepburn in her UNICEF days. And her newfound passion was conveniently, exclusively focused on the one charity most publicly linked to me, the Children's Heart Hospital. She began dropping hints, loud enough for key people to overhear, about planning a truly transformative gesture for the gala. Something unprecedented, she'd murmur, eyes wide with faux sincerity. I just feel so compelled to do something significant. No numbers yet, just a vague promise hanging in the air, designed to pique curiosity and build her own mystique. The unease I'd felt earlier curdled into active suspicion. This wasn't just competition, it felt like a calculated campaign. She wasn't just trying to shine, she was trying to cast a shadow over me, using the hospital as her backdrop. Every overly saccharine social media post, every strategically dropped hint, felt like another brick in the wall she was building around the gala, trying to claim it as her own territory. I started sleeping less, my mind racing, wondering what her endgame truly was. The sense of impending doom grew heavier each day. The transition from passive aggression to outright sabotage was jarringly swift. As the gala date drew closer, Clara seemed to panic, her actions becoming desperate, reckless. The carefully constructed facade began to crack under the pressure of her own ambition. The first direct hit was aimed at the heart of my event's theme, the lighting. My vendor, specialists in the intricate constellation projections, called me in a state of near panic. Clara had contacted them directly, offering them almost double their fee to work on a different, newly invented event of hers scheduled deliberately on the same weekend as the gala. It was a blatant attempt to force them into a scheduling conflict, hoping they'd ditch my long-standing contract for the bigger payday. My blood boiled. This wasn't just unprofessional, it was malicious. Thankfully, my contract was solid gold, and my relationship with the vendor was built on years of mutual respect. They were appalled by her tactics and assured me they wouldn't dream of canceling. But the sheer audacity of the attempt rattled me. She was willing to actively damage the hospital's fundraiser to get at me. Next, the whispers escalated into direct attacks on my reputation with the gala committee. Margaret, a committee member known for being easily swayed by flattery and drama, approached me after a planning meeting, her face etched with faux concern. "Sarah, darling," she began, lowering her voice conspiratorially, "I've heard some troubling things about the gala budget. Are you sure everything is under control? Some people are worried things are getting out of hand." Out of hand? My budget was tracked down to the penny, shared transparently each month. I knew instantly this was Clara's work, feeding poison into Margaret's ear, hoping to create panic, perhaps even get me removed or forced to share control. I spent hours compiling extra reports, walking Margaret and other key members through every line item again, reassuring them, defending myself against phantom accusations. It was exhausting, infuriating, and stole precious time from actually planning the damn event. Then came the masterstroke, the move designed to seize control of the entire narrative. About 4 weeks before the gala, Clara requested an urgent, private meeting with the hospital director and the most influential members of the gala committee. I was pointedly excluded. My sympathetic source on the committee called me immediately afterward, sounding stunned. Clara, radiating confidence and faux humility, had announced her intention to make a personal donation of $100,000 to the hospital. The catch? The announcement, the full glory of it, was to be made live, on stage, at the gala. $100,000. The figure hung in the air, stunning everyone into silence, then into rapturous excitement. It was an enormous sum, enough to guarantee headlines, enough to overshadow every other aspect of the event. It instantly repositioned Clara from a mere attendee, or competitor, to the gala's philanthropic superstar. My heart sank. Not just because she was stealing the spotlight, but because that number, it felt impossible. I knew enough about Clara's finances, her constant need to project wealth she didn't quite have. Where was $100,000 suddenly materializing from? It screamed fabrication. But the committee, understandably thrilled by the prospect of such a massive donation, was completely snowed. They saw only the zeros, not the glaring red flags. They saw a savior, not a manipulator. Clara had played her trump card, using the hospital's genuine need as leverage for her own glorification. I felt trapped, angry, but mostly deeply suspicious. If this donation was fake, or built on shaky foundations, the fallout for the hospital could be devastating. This wasn't about my ego anymore. This was about protecting the integrity of the cause I cared so deeply about. I couldn't let her potentially defraud the hospital and exploit sick children for PR. The game had changed. My focus shifted from defense to offense. I needed proof. I needed to know what Clara was really planning, and I was determined to find it. That $100,000 figure became an obsession. It looped in my mind, clanging like a discordant bell against everything I knew or suspected about Clara. It wasn't just a donation. It felt like a performance piece, and I needed to see behind the curtain. My gut screamed that it was too good, too sudden, too Clara to be true. Protecting the hospital's reputation, and frankly, my own sanity, depended on uncovering the reality behind the grand promise. I didn't need cloak and dagger tactics. Clara's biggest weakness was her ego, her insatiable need to boast and impress. People like that get careless. They underestimate the observers, especially the ones they've wronged. My listening intensified. I attended every pre-gala function, not just as the planner, but as an intelligence gatherer. I watched Clara work the rooms, noting who she talked to, her shifts in body language, the subtle flicker of calculation in her eyes. The first clue, the first thread I could pull, emerged at a sponsor thank-you luncheon. Clara was holding court with the CEO of a tech firm, a major potential sponsor she was clearly trying to poach for her own roster. Trying to project an image of effortless generosity and financial acumen, she waved a dismissive hand when he congratulated her on her upcoming hospital donation. "Oh, the 100,000 is wonderful, of course," she purred, leaning in slightly, "but it's really about the long-term impact. We've structured it very strategically, disbursements tied to certain hospital expansion benchmarks being met down the line. Ensures accountability, you know. Standard for sophisticated philanthropy." She winked, as if sharing an insider secret. My blood ran cold. Disbursements tied to benchmarks? That sounded alarmingly conditional. Why hadn't she mentioned these benchmarks when she made the pledge to the director? They thought it was straightforward cash. She was trying to sound savvy but had accidentally revealed the strings attached. It smelled like an escape clause. The definitive proof, however, landed right in my lap, courtesy of Clara's own hubris and carelessness. In the final frantic week before the gala, she was emailing constantly, adjusting her demands for seating, lighting during her speech, and, crucially, the exact script for the presenter announcing her donation. Late one evening, my inbox pinged. An email from Clara. Subject: Gala presentation wording final. I open it, expecting just the text. But Clara, likely juggling multiple urgent tasks, distracted by a phone call or perhaps admiring her own reflection, I later heard she'd been frantically trying to arrange a last-minute press interview for after the gala, hadn't just forwarded the final text. She'd hit forward on the entire email chain with her financial advisor. My breath caught. My hands started shaking as I scrolled down, past the approved, sanitized announcement text, into the earlier messages. And there it was. Black and white. The 100,000 wasn't her money. It was contingent on her securing a high-interest, short-term loan. The advisor was clearly nervous about the viability. And the actual donation? The transfer of funds to the hospital was explicitly conditional on the hospital receiving specific, multi-million-dollar federal grants for a proposed new wing within 6 months. Grants that were notoriously competitive, far from guaranteed, and certainly not on that accelerated timeline. The fine print was wickedly clever. It allowed her to make the splashy announcement, reap the PR awards, and then, months later, if the grants didn't materialize exactly as specified, she could withdraw the pledge, blaming bureaucracy or unforeseen circumstances. She would have had her moment of glory, built on a foundation of pure deception, leaving the hospital holding an empty promise. I printed the entire chain. The weight of the paper in my hand felt immense. Anger surged through me, hot and fierce, mixed with a strange, cold clarity. She wasn't just lying, she was orchestrating a cruel fraud, using the hopes of sick children as collateral for her ambition. She thought she was untouchable, sailing towards her triumph. She had no idea I now held the torpedo that could sink her entire ship. The power had shifted. All I had to do was wait for the perfect moment to strike. The gala couldn't come soon enough. Gala night. The air in the grand ballroom buzzed, thick with the scent of expensive florals and anticipation. Crystal chandeliers dripped light onto silks and tuxedos. My constellations of hope themes shimmered overhead, casting a magical glow that felt deeply ironic given the deception I knew was lurking. I moved through the elegantly dressed crowd, a polite smile fixed on my face, nodding to guests, checking on my team, my hand instinctively tightening around the small clutch containing the damning emails. Inside, my nerves felt like live wires. Clara naturally made a fashionably late entrance designed to turn heads. She wore a gown the color of spilled wine, dramatic and demanding attention. She glided through the room like royalty, air-kissing dignitaries, her eyes constantly scanning, making sure her arrival was duly noted. Our eyes met briefly across the glittering expanse. She gave me that look again, a fleeting, razor-sharp smile that didn't reach her eyes. Pure, unadulterated smugness. She believed the night was hers. Dinner progressed, speeches were delivered. The live auction paddles flew, driven by genuine generosity that warmed my heart slightly amidst the tension. But an undercurrent remained. Everyone was waiting for the main event, Clara's moment. Finally, it arrived. Dr. Matthews, the hospital director, a kind man whose passion I deeply respected, took the stage. His face glowed with pride as he spoke about the children, the dedicated staff, the vital need for support. Then, his voice thick with emotion, he introduced Clara, praising her stunning act of generosity, her visionary commitment, her heartfelt support. The build-up was excruciating. Clara ascended the steps to the stage, practically floating, accepting the roaring applause like she was born to it. She took the microphone, paused dramatically until a hush fell over the room, and launched into her speech. It was a masterclass in manipulation, feigned humility, choked-up emotion, anecdotes likely borrowed or invented. She spoke of being humbled by the hospital's work, of feeling an irresistible pull to contribute. And so, she declared, her voice ringing with practiced sincerity, her gaze sweeping the room. Tonight, with immense gratitude and hope, I pledge a personal contribution of $100,000 to this incredible institution. The ballroom exploded. Standing ovation. Cheers. Whistles. Camera flashes blindingly bright. Clara beamed, waved, clutched her heart. She accepted the giant ceremonial check from Dr. Matthews, holding it high like a conquering hero. She looked straight at me, locking eyes, her expression screaming, I won. My turn came just moments later. The closing remarks. My legs felt like lead weights as I walked towards the stage, the applause for Clara still echoing. My heart hammered against my ribs, so hard I thought it might crack them. I reached the lectern, took a deep breath, and gripped the sides. Good evening, everyone. I began, surprised my voice sounded relatively calm, steady. Thank you, truly, for being here tonight. Your energy, your support, your tangible generosity in the auction, and, through your pledges, it directly impacts the lives of children and their families. I paused, letting my gaze linger on Dr. Matthews, on the committee members seated nearby. We've celebrated incredible acts of giving tonight. And, of course, we've just heard Ms. Bellwether's significant announcement. Another deliberate pause. The room was utterly silent now. All eyes were on me. Clara, hovering near the side of the stage, still flushed with victory, watched me, a faint frown appearing. Genuine philanthropy, I continued, my voice gaining firmness, the kind that builds futures and saves lives, thrives on clarity, on commitment, on trust. Every dollar given without reservation tonight is a lifeline. I turned my head slightly, looking towards Clara without making direct eye contact. That's why transparency around major gifts is paramount. For example, I kept my tone measured, informative, a pledge that is contingent upon the hospital securing highly competitive, multi-million-dollar federal grants for future projects within a specific, uncertain timeframe, say, 6 months, is fundamentally different. While perhaps presented with good intentions, such a conditional promise carries significant risk. It cannot be relied upon for immediate needs or current operational budgets. A wave of confusion washed over the audience. People shifted in their seats, murmuring, glancing at each other, then at Clara. Her face, just moments ago radiant, instantly crumpled. The color drained from it, leaving behind a sickly pale mask of shock, then dawning horror. Her eyes darted wildly between me and Dr. Matthews. The Children's Heart Hospital, I concluded, my voice ringing clear in the suddenly tense silence, looking directly at the director now, depends on unwavering, reliable support to provide its critical care. I know the board, the staff, and most importantly, the families rely on that certainty. As I finished speaking, I reached into my clutch, pulled out the folded email chain, and quietly, deliberately, placed it on the lectern next to Dr. Matthews' notes. He glanced down, then back at me, understanding dawning in his eyes. The atmosphere had curdled. The adoration for Clara evaporated, replaced by stunned silence, then a growing, angry buzz. She stood frozen for a second, exposed under the harsh lights, her carefully crafted world shattering around her. The spotlight she craved had become a crucible. Her triumphant moment had turned into her public execution. The silence following my words stretched for an agonizing moment, thick and heavy. Then Clara snapped into motion. There was no defense, no explanation offered. Her face was a mixture of pure rage and utter humiliation. She stumbled backward, away from the lectern, away from Dr. Matthews, who was now staring pointedly at the emails I'd left. She didn't run, exactly, but she fled, head down, weaving blindly through the stunned tables, her wine-red dress a blur against the shocked faces. The grand doors of the ballroom swung shut behind her, swallowing her into the night. The tension broke, replaced by a cacophony of whispers. Conditional? Did she really? 100,000 fake? The gossip spread like spilled wine across a white tablecloth. Dr. Matthews, after a moment to compose himself and quickly scan the top email, returned to the microphone. His voice was tight with controlled anger, but professional. He thanked everyone once more for their genuine support, emphasizing the word, and swiftly concluded the evening. He never mentioned Clara's name again. Her grand pledge had vanished, as if it never happened. The fallout for Clara was, from what I gathered, catastrophic. Professionally, she became radioactive. Clients canceled. Sponsors vanished. Industry colleagues who had once courted her favor now avoided her calls. Her carefully curated image imploded, leaving behind only the ugly truth of her deception. The story became legendary in event planning circles, a stark warning about hubris and fraudulent philanthropy. She reportedly had to lay off most of her staff and retreated completely from the public eye, her vibrant social media presence going dark. For me, the aftermath was quieter, but profound. There was a wave of respect from colleagues, the committee, and even Dr. Matthews, who thanked me privately for my discretion and courage in protecting the hospital's integrity. My business didn't just survive, it thrived, built on the very foundation of trust that Clara had tried to demolish. The Gala, stripped of the fake pledge, was still a financial success due to the real generosity of others and my role in ensuring that success was recognized. Looking back, I don't feel triumphant glee about Clara's downfall. There's a certain hollowness in witnessing someone's complete unraveling, even someone who caused you so much stress and tried to actively harm your career. But I feel a deep, quiet sense of vindication. She crossed a line, attempting to exploit vulnerable children and the goodwill of an entire community for her own vanity. Exposing her wasn't just about revenge for me, it was about restoring truth and protecting something genuinely important. It taught me that facing down deceit, even when it's terrifying, is essential. Sometimes, the most satisfying victories aren't loud or flashy, but are found in the quiet certainty that you stood firm for what was right, ensuring that integrity, not illusion, carried the day.